Rookie cop forced black woman to kneel. Had no idea she's the AG's only daughter. The lights from the street lamps flickered softly, casting long shadows across the sidewalks. Officer James Carter, a rookie in the police force, was on his first solo patrol. He had joined the department just a few months ago, fresh out of the academy, full of ambition and eager to prove himself. Every turn of the wheels and every glance in the rearview mirror made him feel responsible, as if the safety of the entire city rested on his shoulders. James had been trained for months, learning rules, procedures, and the importance of following orders. But nothing could truly prepare him for the unpredictability of the streets at night. The quiet of the city was deceiving. He knew that even in the calmest neighborhoods, anything could happen. That night he drove slowly down a residential street, eyes scanning for anything out of the ordinary, his mind alert to every sound, the distant bark of a dog, the rustling of leaves, even the faintest footsteps on the sidewalk. It was then that he noticed her. A young black woman, walking alone, her steps brisk but careful, as if she knew the streets were not always safe after dark. She was wearing a simple jacket and carrying a small bag, her hair tied neatly behind her head. There was something about her posture, quiet, confident, and yet cautious, that made James pause. He hesitated for a moment, weighing his thoughts. According to his training, there was nothing suspicious about her. She wasn't doing anything wrong. Yet in the corner of his mind, the fears instilled during his academy days began to rise. Strangers walking alone at night could be dangerous, or so he had been told to assume. With a sense of unease, James slowly pulled his patrol car to the curb, the engine rumbling softly in the still night. He switched on the flashing lights, the red and blue glow bouncing off the buildings and reflecting in the woman's eyes. She stopped mid-step, startled, and turned to look at him. "Good evening, ma'am," James said, his voice steady but carrying a hint of nervousness. "Do you mind if I ask where you're headed?" The woman studied him carefully. She could sense the tension in his voice, the uncertainty in his posture. "I'm just walking home," she replied calmly, her voice soft but firm. "Is there a problem, officer?" James cleared his throat, trying to steady his thoughts. He had been trained to maintain authority, to take control of situations, but now that he was facing a real person, not a simulation, he felt a knot in his stomach. "I'm just making sure everything is okay," he said. "It's late, and I need to ensure people are safe." The woman nodded, but her eyes narrowed slightly. She had walked these streets countless times and had rarely been approached by the police without cause. Something in his demeanor, perhaps his nervous energy, made her cautious. She took a step back, instinctively putting space between them. James felt a surge of confidence. "I need you to stop here for a moment," he said. "Please stay where you are." Her expression changed slightly. Surprise and confusion crossed her face. "Excuse me?" she asked. "I said stay right here. Don't move," he repeated, more firmly this time, trying to mask the growing unease in his chest. She hesitated, sensing that the situation was escalating. James, in his rookie anxiety, was starting to see her compliance as necessary to maintain control. He asked her to kneel, not as a form of punishment, but because his training had drilled into him the importance of gaining control in uncertain situations. The command felt instinctive to him, though it made his stomach twist as he spoke the words. The woman's eyes widened. She had never been in a situation like this before. Her pride and dignity made it difficult to comply, but there was a flicker of fear as well. She bent slightly, lowering herself to the ground, her hands resting lightly on her knees. She wasn't defiant, but she was confused and hurt. She had not done anything wrong, and yet here she was, obeying a command that felt unnecessary and humiliating. As she knelt there, the silence between them stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. James could feel his heart pounding in his chest, a mixture of authority and uncertainty swirling inside him. He glanced at his radio, considering calling for backup, but hesitated. Part of him wanted to justify his actions, while another part of him felt a growing guilt that he couldn't ignore. The woman looked up at him, her eyes steady despite the situation. "Officer," she said calmly, "can you tell me why I have to do this?" James froze for a moment, the words catching in his throat. He realized he didn't have a clear answer. He had acted out of fear, training, and instinct, not because of anything she had done. The realization hit him suddenly. He had made a mistake. His mind raced, trying to figure out how to handle the situation without making it worse. As he reached for his radio, a colleague's voice came through the earpiece, asking for identification verification. James glanced at the woman's ID, expecting the usual routine check. That's when he saw it, the name, the address. His breath caught in his throat. She was not just any resident. She was the daughter of the Attorney General, someone whose influence and position carried immense weight in the city. The weight of the moment hit him like a wave. His knees felt weak, and the authority he had tried to assert evaporated instantly. He looked down at her, kneeling there with dignity and calm despite the shock he must also be feeling. I didn't know," he stammered, unable to meet her eyes. The woman's face softened slightly, though her confusion and anger were still present. She realized that he was a rookie, inexperienced and nervous, and that his actions, while wrong, were not malicious. Still, the humiliation of the moment could not be ignored. She slowly stood, her posture straight, her eyes never leaving his. James stepped back, his hands raised slightly in a gesture of apology. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I overreacted. I didn't know who you were." The woman nodded, her voice calm but firm. "It's important to remember that people like me are still human. We deserve respect and fairness, no matter what you think." The tension in the air remained thick, but there was also a shift, an acknowledgement that mistakes had been made and that lessons would need to be learned. James realized that this encounter was more than just a routine stop. It was a moment that would shape his understanding of authority, bias, and responsibility for years to come. As the woman walked away, James sat in his car, staring at the dashboard, replaying every second of the encounter in his mind. He thought about the fear he had felt, the power he had tried to assert, and the embarrassment of realizing he had misjudged a situation. The quiet of the night seemed heavier now, filled with the weight of lessons that would not soon be forgotten. It was a night that began like any other, with routine patrols and quiet streets, but it ended with a stark reminder of the responsibilities that came with wearing a badge, the importance of humility, and the need to see every person as more than a situation to be controlled. For Officer James Carter, it was a night that marked the beginning of a long journey toward understanding, respect, and true service to the community he had sworn to protect. The next morning, Officer James Carter woke up with a restless feeling he could not shake. The memory of the previous night was vivid, replaying in his mind like a film on loop. Every detail, from the flickering streetlights to the way the young woman had knelt in silence, seemed to echo louder in his thoughts the longer he stayed awake. He had thought he understood his responsibilities as a police officer, but now he realized that authority came with far more weight than he had ever imagined. He prepared for work in a quiet, almost mechanical way, his movements slow and deliberate. Breakfast felt tasteless, and even the aroma of coffee did little to calm his mind. He kept replaying the moment he saw her identification, the realization that she was the Attorney General's daughter. The memory of his panic, the way his stomach had dropped, and the helplessness he had felt all came rushing back. He knew that the consequences of that encounter could be serious, not just for him, but for the entire department. When he arrived at the precinct, the usual hum of activity did little to calm his nerves. Officers moved quickly around him, voices echoing off the walls, phones ringing, and printers whirring. James could barely focus on his morning briefing. His mind was elsewhere, thinking about the young woman, her calm demeanor, and the quiet strength she had shown despite the situation. His partner, Officer Daniels, noticed his unusual silence. "Rough night?" he asked casually, leaning against the edge of the desk. James sighed. "You could say that," he replied, his voice low. He hesitated, unsure whether to explain everything. But after a moment he spoke, recounting the encounter in detail. "I stopped a woman walking alone last night. I asked her to kneel. I thought I was doing my duty, keeping control. And then I saw her ID. She's the Attorney General's daughter." Daniels whistled softly, shaking his head. "Wow, that's a big one." "You're lucky nothing got worse." He clapped James on the shoulder. "But hey, rookie mistakes happen. You'll learn from this." James nodded, but the reassurance did little to ease the heavy feeling in his chest. He knew this was not a simple mistake. The stakes were high, and the public and internal scrutiny could be intense. The encounter was already spreading through the department like wildfire. Whispers of the incident reached him even as he walked the hallways. Some officers offered sympathetic looks, others avoided eye contact altogether. James could feel the weight of judgment on him, both from his colleagues and from himself. Meanwhile, the young woman, Cassandra, was dealing with her own whirlwind of emotions. The previous night's events had left her shaken. Walking home had been humiliating, confusing, and frightening all at once. She had never imagined that a simple walk in her own neighborhood could lead to such a tense and awkward situation. Yet she had also realized something important. Her response mattered. She could choose to allow the fear and humiliation to control her, or she could handle it with calm dignity. Cassandra chose the latter. By morning, she had spoken with her father, the Attorney General. He was furious not at her but at the situation and the systemic issues it revealed. "This is unacceptable," he said, his voice a mix of anger and concern. "We will handle this appropriately, but I need to know you're okay. Your safety and dignity come first." Cassandra appreciated his concern, but she also knew that she had to face the situation with composure. Her father's status meant that anything she did or said would carry weight and attract attention. She understood the delicate balance between standing up for herself and not escalating a situation unnecessarily. Her calmness, however, was not easy. It was a result of careful thought and emotional control. Back at the precinct, James could feel the tension building. His commanding officer called him into the office, a stern look on her face. "Officer Carter, we need to discuss last night's incident," she said. James followed her inside, heart pounding. He knew that this was not just a routine conversation. The department was taking the matter seriously, and the involvement of the Attorney General's family elevated the stakes. "Explain exactly what happened," she began, her tone firm but not hostile. James recounted the events in as much detail as possible, trying to convey both his intentions and the mistakes he had made. "I thought I was acting correctly," he said. "I was nervous, and I wanted to ensure the situation was under control. I didn't know who she was at the time." The commanding officer listened carefully, her expression thoughtful. "Officer Carter, you are still new, and we understand that mistakes happen. But this situation highlights the importance of judgment, awareness, and treating every citizen with respect. Regardless of your training, the way you handle yourself can have consequences far beyond what you imagine." James nodded solemnly, realizing that he had crossed an invisible line, even if unintentionally. He felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever before. Word of the incident began to circulate outside the precinct. Social media posts, news alerts, and community forums discussed what had happened. Some people were outraged at the way the situation was handled, while others debated the pressures and challenges faced by new officers. Cassandra, aware of the public interest, decided to address the situation with grace and clarity. She posted a calm statement on her personal social media account, emphasizing fairness, respect, and the importance of understanding. She did not attack the officer personally, but she highlighted the larger issue of how people are treated, particularly in vulnerable moments. Her statement resonated with many. People admired her composure and courage. It sparked conversations about respect, responsibility, and accountability. It also reminded everyone involved, including James, that actions, even if well-intentioned, can have lasting effects on others. Meanwhile, James spent long hours reflecting on his choices. He revisited his training materials, spoke with mentors, and considered how he could approach similar situations in the future. He realized that being a police officer required more than following rules. It required empathy, awareness, and a deep understanding of human behavior. He understood that authority was not about control or fear, but about service, protection, and respect. As the day progressed, he received a message from Cassandra herself. She wrote simply, "I hope you take this as a chance to learn, not just a mistake to regret." Respect goes both ways, and everyone has the right to be treated with dignity. James read the message multiple times. He felt a mixture of relief and humility. The young woman he had inadvertently humiliated was offering him guidance and understanding. Her words were a reminder that even in moments of error, growth was possible. That evening, James returned to his patrol with a new perspective. The streets looked different now, not because they had changed, but because he had changed. He walked and drove with a heightened sense of awareness, not just for potential danger, but for the people around him. He noticed the small details he had missed before, the way neighbors smiled at each other, the quiet routines of people heading home after work, the way children played in the fading light. He realized that every individual he encountered had a story, feelings, and dignity that deserved recognition. At home, Cassandra reflected on her own experience. She thought about the moments she had felt powerless and afraid, and how she had chosen to respond with patience and dignity. She realized that her actions could influence others, create dialogue, and inspire understanding. Her father praised her for her composure, reminding her that the way she handled the incident spoke volumes about her character. The city, meanwhile, continued its routine, unaware of the personal lessons unfolding in quiet neighborhoods. For James, the rookie officer, and Cassandra, the Attorney General's daughter, the encounter had become a turning point. It was a night that would forever influence their perspectives, choices, and understanding of one another. It was not just a story about a misunderstanding. It was a story about awareness, accountability, and the human capacity for empathy and growth. By the end of Part 2, both James and Cassandra had learned something crucial. That respect, understanding, and dignity were far more powerful than fear, authority, or assumptions. The experience, though tense and challenging, became a foundation for reflection and personal development for both of them. The day after the incident, the atmosphere at the police precinct was tense. Officer James Carter could feel the weight of the previous night hanging over him like a heavy cloud. The whispers of other officers, the quiet glances, and even the casual questions from colleagues made him acutely aware that everyone knew something significant had happened. It was no longer just a routine shift. It had become a moment that could affect not only his career, but also the public's perception of the police department. James sat at his desk, staring at the computer screen, but he could barely focus on the paperwork in front of him. The events of the night kept replaying in his mind. The way Cassandra had knelt when he asked her to, the look in her eyes that mixed confusion with quiet strength, and the moment he had realized who she really was. Each memory brought a fresh wave of guilt and reflection. His commanding officer called him into her office once again. "James, the department is taking this matter very seriously," she began, her tone measured but firm. "There will be an internal review, and we will need to ensure that all procedures were followed correctly. More importantly, we need to understand how this situation escalated to the point it did." James nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I understand, and I'm ready to cooperate fully." The internal review began in the following days. Officers were asked to provide statements, recounting their observations and interactions from the night of the incident. James answered every question honestly, explaining his intentions, the decisions he made, and the realization that he had acted without complete awareness of the situation. The review was thorough, leaving him feeling exposed, but also understanding the necessity of accountability. Meanwhile, Cassandra's experience was being discussed quietly among community members, journalists, and public officials. The news of the incident had reached local media, and while some reports focused on the police's perspective, many highlighted the importance of empathy, fairness, and proper judgment in law enforcement. Cassandra, aware of her father's position and the attention it could bring, chose to stay composed. She avoided making public statements that could escalate tension, instead relying on measured communication with her father and his office. Her father, the Attorney General, was in constant contact with the police department. He expressed concern for his daughter, but also stressed the importance of handling the situation with care. "This is not just about one night," he explained to James during a carefully arranged meeting. "It's about trust, community relationships, and ensuring that mistakes are addressed in a constructive way. We want accountability, but we also want solutions that prevent this from happening again." James felt a mixture of relief and anxiety during the meeting. On one hand, he was grateful that the Attorney General was willing to work with him constructively. On the other, he was acutely aware that any misstep from this point forward could have serious consequences. He realized that his actions, though unintentional, had created a ripple effect that extended far beyond the street where the encounter had occurred. The internal review revealed several important lessons. One was the importance of clear communication. James had acted out of instinct and training, but his approach lacked clarity and context, which contributed to the tension. Another lesson was the need for officers to be aware of the broader social and personal contexts of the individuals they interact with. While James had followed procedures to some extent, He had failed to consider how his actions could be perceived or how they might affect the person involved. Throughout the review process, James began attending additional training sessions focused on empathy, communication, and community engagement. These sessions were designed to help officers understand how to handle complex situations without relying solely on authority or instinct. He learned techniques for de-escalation, for listening carefully before acting, and for recognizing the humanity in every individual he encountered. Cassandra, meanwhile, continued to reflect on the experience. She realized that the incident, while uncomfortable, had the potential to be a teaching moment not just for James, but for the community as a whole. She discussed the situation with her father, emphasizing that she did not want to vilify the officer personally, but rather encourage a broader understanding of respect, fairness, and accountability. Public attention continued to grow. Community leaders, journalists, and citizens engaged in discussions about the incident. Many praised Cassandra's calm and thoughtful response, noting that her approach encouraged dialogue rather than conflict. Some criticized the officer's initial actions, pointing out the need for better training and awareness in law enforcement. The conversation highlighted larger societal issues, including trust between communities and police, the responsibilities of authority, and the impact of assumptions and bias. For James, each day of reflection and training brought new insights. He began to understand the importance of humility in his role. Being a police officer was not about asserting power or control. It was about serving and protecting the community, with an emphasis on understanding and compassion. He realized that every interaction, no matter how routine it seemed, had the potential to affect people's lives in profound ways. One afternoon, James was asked to attend a meeting with community representatives and advocacy groups. The meeting was designed to foster understanding between the police and the public. James listened as members shared their experiences, concerns, and suggestions for improvement. He spoke honestly about his own experience, acknowledging his mistake and explaining the steps he was taking to learn and grow. The room was tense at first, but gradually, a sense of understanding began to develop. People appreciated his honesty and willingness to change, even if the incident had been serious. Cassandra also participated in some of these discussions, lending her voice to the conversation in measured, thoughtful ways. She spoke about the importance of empathy, the value of treating all individuals with respect, and the potential for growth and learning from mistakes. Her presence reminded everyone that real people, not just abstract concepts or news stories, were at the center of these experiences. As weeks passed, the initial tension began to ease, though the lessons of the incident remained. James continued to patrol his neighborhood with a renewed sense of awareness and responsibility. He approached each encounter with a focus on understanding, communication, and respect. He noticed small details he had overlooked before: the way people responded to polite, calm conversation, the way patience and empathy could diffuse potentially tense situations, and the importance of seeing individuals as more than just cases or situations. Cassandra, too, continued her life with a heightened awareness of the world around her. She felt proud of the way she had handled the incident, not because of any recognition, but because she had remained true to her values. She realized that courage was not always about confrontation. Sometimes, it was about maintaining dignity, speaking thoughtfully, and influencing change through calm, reasoned actions. The police department, learning from the incident, began implementing additional training programs focused on communication, empathy, and community engagement. James was invited to share his experience with newer officers, emphasizing the lessons he had learned firsthand. His story became a teaching tool, showing that even mistakes could lead to growth and improvement when handled with honesty, reflection, and commitment. By the end of Part 3, the fallout from the incident had transformed from a moment of tension and embarrassment into a broader opportunity for learning and understanding. Both James and Cassandra had grown from the experience, gaining insights into themselves, their roles in the community, and the importance of human connection. The encounter, once a source of anxiety and shame, had become a turning point, highlighting the value of humility, accountability, and empathy in a world where small actions could have lasting impacts. Though the memory of that night would never fade completely, It was no longer a source of fear or shame. Instead, it served as a reminder that growth was possible, that mistakes could be transformed into lessons, and that understanding and respect were far more powerful than assumptions or fear. Both James and Cassandra emerged from the experience with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to move forward with greater awareness, compassion, and resilience. Months had passed since the incident on that quiet street, but the memory of that night remained vivid for both officers. James Carter and Cassandra, the Attorney General's daughter. For James, the experience had become a constant reminder of the responsibility that came with wearing a badge. For Cassandra, it had become a story of patience, dignity, and resilience. Though the immediate tension had eased, both knew that the lessons they had learned would stay with them for the rest of their lives. James had continued his work with renewed focus. He was no longer just a rookie trying to prove himself. He had grown into a more thoughtful, aware officer who understood the power of empathy. Each day, he approached his patrol with a sense of purpose that went beyond rules and regulations. He watched the streets not just for danger, but for people who had their own stories, struggles, and dreams. He remembered the first time he noticed a small detail that would have gone unnoticed before, an elderly man struggling to carry groceries across the street. In the past, James might have driven by, focused on patrol duties and potential threats. But now he stopped his car, walked over, and offered help. The man smiled, thanking him sincerely, and James realized how much impact a small act of kindness could have. It was a simple moment, but it reinforced everything he had learned since that fateful night. Cassandra, meanwhile, had also reflected deeply on the incident. She continued her daily life, attending school, meeting friends, and pursuing her passions, but she carried with her a new understanding of patience and courage. She had learned that courage did not always mean confrontation or loud protests. Sometimes it meant standing quietly, maintaining dignity, and using one's voice thoughtfully. She had also learned that mistakes, even those made by others, could become opportunities for growth and understanding when handled wisely. The community, too, had begun to notice changes. The conversation sparked by the incident had encouraged local leaders and citizens to engage with the police in new ways. Community forums were organized where residents could discuss their experiences, share concerns, and suggest improvements. James participated in these forums, sharing his story honestly, acknowledging his mistake, and describing the steps he had taken to learn and improve. His openness encouraged others to speak freely, fostering an environment of trust and understanding. Cassandra attended some of these forums as well, lending her perspective and calm, thoughtful voice. She spoke about fairness, dignity, and the importance of treating all individuals with respect, regardless of status or background. Her presence reminded everyone that the people at the center of these stories were not just names or news headlines. They were human beings with feelings, hopes, and rights. Back at the precinct, the department had begun to implement meaningful changes. Training programs focused on empathy, communication, and de-escalation had become a priority. Officers were encouraged to engage with the community outside of routine patrols, to understand the neighborhoods they served, and to recognize the humanity in every interaction. James played a key role in these programs, sharing his experience as a teaching tool. He emphasized that mistakes were not the end of a career. They were opportunities to learn, grow, and serve the community better. One day, during a community event organized by the police department, James and Cassandra met again in a more positive setting. There were tables with information about local programs, children playing in nearby areas, and officers and residents mingling in conversation. When James spotted Cassandra, he felt a mix of nervousness and relief. He approached her carefully, wanting to acknowledge her presence without making her uncomfortable. "Cassandra," he said softly, "I just wanted to say thank you again. Not just for the patience you showed, but for teaching me a lesson I won't forget." Cassandra smiled, her eyes reflecting understanding and warmth. "You've already learned it, James," she replied. "You've changed the way you approach your work, and that makes a difference. That's what matters." Their brief conversation was a quiet moment of closure. It reminded both of them that the incident, though difficult, had led to growth, understanding, and a new sense of responsibility. For James, it reinforced the idea that being a police officer was about service and empathy, not just rules and authority. For Cassandra, it confirmed that responding to challenges with dignity and thoughtfulness could influence others and create meaningful change. In the following weeks, James continued to reflect on the lessons he had learned. He realized that empathy and awareness were not innate traits. They were skills that required practice, attention, and intentionality. He made it a personal goal to approach every encounter, whether routine or unexpected, with careful thought, patience, and respect. He also learned to listen more than he spoke, to understand situations fully before acting, and to remember that everyone he met had a story beyond what he could see. Cassandra, too, continued her journey of reflection and action. She became involved in local programs focused on community engagement, education, and equality. She used her experiences to help others understand the importance of dignity, respect, and fair treatment. Her story became a source of inspiration for her peers, for community members, and even for law enforcement officers who wanted to learn how to better connect with the people they served. The ripple effects of that night continued to spread. Community leaders reported stronger relationships between residents and the police. Officers who had previously relied solely on authority and protocol now considered empathy and communication as essential tools in their work. The department began to see fewer conflicts escalate unnecessarily, and public trust slowly strengthened. For James, the personal growth he experienced was profound. He realized that being a good officer did not mean never making mistakes. It meant acknowledging them, learning from them, and striving to do better every day. He had learned humility, patience, and the power of thoughtful action. He understood that his role was not about asserting control over others, but about protecting, serving, and respecting the people in his community. Cassandra's experience also became a foundation for advocacy and dialogue. She spoke at schools, community centers, and local events about her perspective, emphasizing that fairness and understanding could create lasting change. She encouraged young people to stand up for themselves with dignity and encouraged adults to listen, learn, and act responsibly. Her story reminded people that even moments of tension and difficulty could lead to growth, connection, and positive transformation. As time went on, James and Cassandra's lives continued in their own paths, but the lessons of that night remained ever present. James approached every shift with a renewed sense of purpose, aware that his actions could influence lives in ways both small and large. Cassandra approached her life with confidence, patience, and the knowledge that her response to challenges could inspire others. Both had experienced a night of tension and misunderstanding, but they had transformed it into a story of growth, reflection, and human connection. Eventually, the incident became a story shared as an example of learning and accountability. Police officers referenced it in training sessions, community leaders mentioned it in discussions, and Cassandra's measured response was celebrated as a model of dignity and strength. The story was no longer about fear, mistake, or embarrassment. It was about understanding, empathy, and the power of positive action. For James, the memory of that night was no longer a source of shame. Instead, it was a reminder of why he had joined the force, to make a difference in people's lives, to protect the vulnerable, and to serve his community with integrity. For Cassandra, it was a reminder that patience, thoughtfulness, and courage could influence others and create meaningful change. The city moved forward, as cities always do, but its people were forever influenced by a single night and the lessons it carried. One rookie officer and a young woman, connected by circumstance, had sparked reflection, dialogue, and growth that extended far beyond their immediate lives. Their story became a testament to the human capacity for learning, understanding, and improvement, even in the most unexpected situations. By the end of this journey, both James and Cassandra had discovered that mistakes were not failures, they were opportunities. Opportunities to grow, to connect, and to make the world a little more thoughtful, fair, and compassionate. The encounter that had begun with tension and misunderstanding had ended with reflection, resolution, and a deeper sense of purpose for both of them. And in that realization, they found peace, not because the past could be changed, but because they had changed, and in doing so, they had turned a single, difficult night into a lifelong lesson that would guide them in the days, months, and years to come.